Warning: the information or views displayed on this podcast may not be the same as any one individual listener's views. If you strongly disagree, you have the freedom to simply turn it off or get your own podcast to voice your own views or information if this podcast does not fulfill your idea of what should be talked about. You're listening to Fringianity. Hello and welcome to the Fringianity podcast. This week I'll be analyzing, two films and a Netflix series that I feel strongly about. I guess I have some opinions about these things and kind of analyzing what the message is behind some of the stuff that we see in movies and media in general. So with that, let's get to the scriptures and then we'll start the show. Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or any observer of times, or any enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Okay, so the first movie, I guess, that I recently seen or whatever, I actually got to see these movies for free, actually. But I'm glad I did in a way, because, they're not good in a lot of ways, especially the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. This is a big movie. It just made $1 billion, and it didn't cost that much to make. So I'm sure there'll be more stuff like that DC or Warner Brothers will be putting out now, because they made a ton of money on this little project. But the reason I wanted to do some analysis is I'm not really reviewing them like it's some kind of a review thing. So please don't just turn the show off if you didn't see it and you're not really into it, because I'm not really going to be glorifying these films in a lot of ways. I'm going to be talking about the things that they put into films that, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear as a Christian, you will pick up on, and you'll see like the theme. Like sometimes they put things in movies that they want to be in the consciousness of the people, so that when such a thing, like such a horrible thing happens, it's like they already programmed you for it. You know what I mean? And that's the point of this episode, is to kind of go into some of that. I know a lot of people don't like it when I talk about a lot of movies and content that they haven't seen, but if you want to see these movies, by the way, I'm probably going to be spoiling some of it, So don't listen to this in that case. But if you don't care, which a lot of people that are listening to this might not really care, then just listen for the content that I'm talking about, that the suggestions that I see in these movies that may pop up in the real world, you know what I mean? Or themes that are realistic in the world that are put into movies. And sometimes the things that they put into some of these movies is actually technically not bad, because it's kind of exposing it, but in a kind of a secret, covert kind of way. And people like me, who have eyes to see and ears to hear, might actually pick up on that, whereas the rest of the world is brainwashed, might not. So it kind of works both ways. So it's not like a movie can be evil, or it could be good. It's a tool, I think, in a lot of ways. But I mean, acting is being basically lying, so it's not probably the best either. But it's up to you to decipher that for yourself. I'm just going to present you with the information and what my opinions are and what I feel that the Bible might say in regards to some of this stuff. So that's where I'm at with this. So to start off this, I'm going to talk about the Joker and some of the themes that came out of this movie that I seen that are disturbing. Now this movie, I believe, kind of has the themes of some pretty evil and disgusting things in it, but it also shines light on things that I think the world should be talking about a little bit too. So before I start getting into it, I'll play the trailer just so I can get that out of the way for anyone who doesn't know anything about this.
Can you please stop bothering my kid?
Sorry.
Arthur, I have some bad news for you. This is the last time we'll be meeting.
You don't listen, do you? You just ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts.
And finally, in a world where everyone thinks they can do my job, check out this guy.
When I was a little boy and told people I was going to be a comedian, everyone laughed at me. Well, no one's laughing now.
You can say that again, pal.
It's so awful, isn't it?
For my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do. And people are starting to notice.
You think this is funny? Is this a joke to you?
Murray, one small thing.
Yeah.
When you bring me out, can you introduce me as Joker?
Send in the clowns.
Okay, so that was the Joker trailer. And it's basically Joaquin Phoenix. He's a mentally ill person, and he's going to psychiatrists, and she doesn't listen to him, and the whole society doesn't listen to him, and he's just kind of mentally ill, and things are going wrong. Nothing goes right for this guy. It takes place in like the 70s, and it basically ends up where a lot of things that you see in the movie are kind of through his perspective, but he's kind of mentally ill and insane, so you kind of see things that sometimes you wonder if they're real or if they're just his perception. It's kind of messed up because you're feeling sympathy for a guy who ends up killing people. He doesn't kill, like, everybody. He doesn't kill, like, he kills people that cross him, I guess, in a lot of ways. That doesn't make him a good guy. And it's really messed up, and yes, and this is what the Joker, you know, Batman's villain is. This is who he is. This is what he's about. I mean, it's not a surprise to me, and it's got some themes in it or whatever. There's this build-up of criminal acts and, like, mentally illness, you know, rage kind of building toward elites and rich people in the city at this time, and he basically goes about doing some things, and then people notice him because he goes on to this basically like a Johnny Carson type show, and, well, I'm going to spoil it, this is the end of the movie, he kills the host of the show because he called him on the show to make fun of his comedy act, that he's not a very good comedian. And he does it on live TV. Of course, the TV cuts, but everybody in the city seen that, and all of the crazies, the people that are just waiting for a reason to attack and destroy the city, they go off because of they seen him, basically. So it was a live televised killing that sets off a basic crime wave, like, of epic proportions and rioting and destruction, which kind of has a lot of themes as to what you see Democrats and a lot of these Antifa people doing in today's society. And it's kind of funny in my head a little bit, because, in a dark humor kind of way, because it's basically saying that the people that are rioting and going nuts in the streets, these Antifa people, are kind of mentally ill. So I don't know what the director, where he stands, but through some way, his movie kind of made fun of Antifa, you know, in a bizarre kind of way. At least that's the way I perceive it. The movie has some themes or whatever. The messages that I picked up were like, you know, mental illness is becoming the norm. The city / the world is in a violent season of rebellion, and that's where we're at, it seems like. I don't know, evil people are becoming bolder as they grow more brainwashed by the mental prison we're all being programmed for. I don't know. That's kind of how I think of it. I don't know. Lawlessness shall abound. You know, like in the Bible, it says lawlessness shall abound in the end times. You know, so there's going to be more lawlessness and more violence and craziness. And the villains wear masks in this movie, just like Antifa wears masks. Why do the villains always have to cover their face? If they're doing such a righteous act, why do you have to cover your face? The rioters are all controlled by their emotions, you know what I mean? And that's what we're seeing with this Antifa stuff. So this movie kind of outs Antifa in a way. And of course, you know, you got almost the theme of the lone gunman shooter type thing. How the shooter's mentally ill, you know, being the Joker on a live TV show. And such and, you know, so and so, you know, and he's off of his meds because he can't get medication because the system is so screwed up, you know, it's just, that's where it's at. That's basically the theme of this movie, and that's the message, basically, that I found in the Joker. And that pretty much sums it up. So now I'm going to get into the sequel to the Stephen King book, and I guess the movie, The Shining. This movie's called Dr. Sleep. I like how this story is told. It feels like a 70s thriller / kind of horror movie. I wasn't really afraid by it. It wasn't anything that I jumped or got scared of. There is a couple scenes where I wasn't proud of the things that happened in it, but it's realistic to what's happening in real life with, like, missing children and people kidnapping them for their own means. And yeah, we don't like to see that, but, you know, it does happen. And since nobody's, like, going after people like Epstein or all of his people in his black book, it seems like no one cares. The trafficking of souls is what the Bible calls it. And it seems like that's going on everywhere, and it's just not being stopped. And our government doesn't stop it, even no matter what. Even Trump hasn't stopped it. I think he's tried to a little bit, but it's kind of hard to crack down on all these people because they're just doing it almost in plain view, you know. It's so abundant, even in the Vatican, I'm sure. So anyway, I'll play the trailer first, and then we'll get back to actually talking about my analysis of it.
When I was a kid, there was a place. A dark place. They closed it down and let it rot. But the things that lived there...
Hello, Danny.
They come back.
Not many ride the bus this far north. You're running away from something?
I'm running away from myself, I guess.
Hi. You can hear me. You're magic. Like me.
I don't know about magic. I was called it the Shining. The world is a hungry place. A dangerous place.
These people, they hurt people like us.
These empty devils, they'll eat what shines. And they noticed that little girl.
Wow. Hi there.
Get out of my head! Get out!
I haven't felt power like that in so long.
They're coming. Where are we going?
There's a place. You sure you want to do this?
I'm ready.
Yes, you run, dear. And then I will find you. And you will scream for years.
Come and play with us forever and ever.
Okay, so now this is Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, the Stephen King story, The Shining, and the movie. So anyway, this movie is interesting because it's basically about Danny, the character from the Shining movie, but he's all grown up. He was the little boy in that movie that saw like the twins in the hallway and all the blood and all that. Anyway, the kid that said red rum and whatever, which is murder backward and all that stuff. Anyway, this movie is not really about the ghost so much that she's seen in The Shining. This is about a whole new story, and I think the story is much more interesting than The Shining in a lot of ways. The Shining movie I thought was pretty good, but I think this story is more interesting because there is the theme of children being kidnapped, and they're using their essence or whatever to try to live longer kind of theme. I don't think that's a good thing. I'm just saying that this kind of deals with that, that children are going missing, and it seems like there's people that just can get away with this, and they just travel from town to town taking children and stealing their essence. And that's what the villains do in this movie. They're basically vampires in a sense, and they just basically hold down. There's a sequence that's really hard if you're a parent to watch in this, where Rose the Hat, which is the main cult member of this villainous group that's chasing down children and taking their children with special abilities. They have to have the Shining ability. The Shining ability is like a telepathic ability. They're very sensitive to things, so they can almost read you. They can read your mind, and they're sensitive. They can pick up when bad things are happening, and they can sense what other people feel in bad times. So they have a little more remorse for somebody because they feel what they're feeling, and whatever. So these villains are going from town to town, basically tracking down young people, children or whatever, that have this shining ability. And the people with the shining ability, they basically take them and kidnap them, go out into the middle of the woods or whatever, and then they hold them down and basically stab them in their limbs, basically, and not try to kill them right away, so they can make their fear and their pain come out in this form of this mist out of their mouth, and they just suck it up and breathe it in, and it's really like demonic and stuff, which makes them good villains because you don't really care to like them then, obviously. And so they're doing this, and while they're doing all this or whatever, Danny, the kid that was from The Shining, grew up, and he's played by Ewan McGregor, which played, the guy that plays Obi-Wan and all. He's a really good actor. Anyway, well, he plays Danny in this movie, and he's an alcoholic like his father was in The Shining, but he actually gets help for it. He runs away from his past and kind of tries to repent of all of his drunken stupidity and his anger and all that stuff that his father, he used to have. He's dealing with his sins of his father, and he's trying to repent of his sins of his father, in a sense. Not in a Christian way, but he's trying to get help anyway. So he ends up going and doing all that and getting help in another town far away from where he was, and then he ends up getting connected with this mentally, with his shining ability, connected with this girl who's over in California, or really far away anyway, who has a really powerful shining ability. And she ends up connecting with him because she can see their murders that the cult is doing. She physically can see it, and she knows where the bodies are buried and all this stuff, and it's hurting her because she's so sensitive. So he basically knows that, and her parents won't understand it, so he basically goes out there because she comes to him, and she talks to him, and then she goes back home or whatever, and then they're connected, and he tells her not to use her abilities, because when she uses her abilities, these cult members can sense that, and then they want to go after her, and they can track her down. And so whatever, and then they basically, the whole point of the story is that they're going to track her down, and well, he's there, and then they do actually kidnap her, but she ends up getting out because Danny helps her and all that stuff. And my point is, this story deals with kidnapping of children and cults, using them for their essence, basically, and draining them of their essence to live longer. Now, this is going to start to become a theme now, because my next thing I'm going to talk about is going to deal with that same subject. But, so, I thought this was a very entertaining movie. It's like a 70s thriller / horror movie, but not so much the horror, because it's not really scary to me. Like I said, the only horror part is really at the end, when they go back to the mansion or whatever, or the hotel where The Shining took place, to try to take and kill to get rid of the Rose of the Hat woman, who is the villain in this. So anyway, but I'm not going to get into all that. But my point is I thought it was a very good movie, and it's almost good enough to be, I think, a good part add to the Shining, as far as I'm concerned. I liked it. In fact, I liked it a lot more than The Shining now, because I've seen The Shining 1,000 times. So I think I like this more, because I don't really care for the ghost aspect of The Shining, because ghosts are demons acting as your grandparents. That's just the way it is. That's the way the Bible describes it, and that's what they are. They're not actually your grandparents. Absent from the body, present with the Lord. That's impossible to be a ghost wandering the earth, unless you're a Nephilim, because they're not able to go into heaven. That's what the Bible says. So that's why there's demons possessing people and all that. So anyway, this story is really an interesting one. And I'm not telling anyone to go see it and all this stuff. It's doing bad, but right now, and I don't know why, because it's probably better than most of the movies playing. It's way better than The Joker. it has at least some substance and it's entertaining to watch, whereas these other movies are just kind of come and go type movies. But that pretty much sums up Dr. Sleep. And by the way, it's called Dr. Sleep because he helps old people pass on to into their next, when they die, because he has his ability to help them mentally. He can talk to them in their mind, and telepathically. He has the ability to calm old people so that they're not fearing death so much, so that they die peacefully. Because he works in a nursing home for a little while in this movie, and the old people call him Dr. Sleep, because when he shows up, when this cat shows up, they know that they're going to pass soon, and then they get scared or whatever, but he comes along and calms them, and that's kind of nice. So anyway, that's pretty much this Dr. Sleep in a kind of summed up. Now, some of the messages in Dr. Sleep that I've seen was basically addiction opens portholes for the enemy to enter. Okay, and that's his alcoholic addiction, just like his father, made him easily to be susceptible and controlled by these ghostly, demonic beings, which that's another one. And magic, don't use magic, because when you use magic, it allows the enemy on the other side to find you and to come to you. That's kind of a theme that's in this movie as well. So those are some biblical themes, I guess, in a way, because God doesn't want you to use magic, and God doesn't want you trapped in an addiction either. So that's kind of just one of the things and like I said, the ghosts are Nephilim demons. They're not actually your grandparents. Those are some themes that I picked up in this movie. Besides the theme that they're kidnapping children and stealing their essence and drinking it and trying to live longer, which like I said, that's going to be a theme in the next little thing that I'm going to talk about too. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so now on to the third one. The third one is Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. This is a prequel to Jim Henson. It's basically all puppets, but it's very interesting looking, and it's very much its own story, and it's kind of almost adult themed. But it was a 70s or 80s movie at one point. I don't know if you know what Dark Crystal is, but if you look it up, it's very. The creativity of these creatures that they made. It's basically on another planet. But boy, the creativity is through the roof with these things. And some of the themes of the creatures and beings in the story, yeah, I think there's a lot of New Age woven into it too. But you can get through that if you just notice the themes of the real world in it as well. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's kind of a kids. It's not really a kids, but it's like a young adult going into adult kind of a show, as far as I'm concerned, because there's a lot of dark themes for a kid. For if it was a kids show, like when I was a kid, the themes of this were pretty dark. But I'll get into that in a minute. Here's the trailer or the commercial, basically, for it.
Throb. At its center, the crystal of truth, the source of all life. The Skeksis have corrupted it. And now our world is at risk from the darkening.
What is the darkening?
Behold.
I saw something. A vision.
You read too many stories.
No, this was real.
Everything the Skeksis ever told us was a lie. And now everyone and everything is at risk. Join me, so we may finally unite as one against our true foe, the Skeksis.
We are eternal!
Resistance is forming.
Are you sure about this? No. But I have hope.
Behold the power of the darkness!
Hope is fragile. Precious. Hope catches the light, splitting the darkness, revealing your destiny.
I don't think anything will ever be like it was again.
No. It will be better.
Okay, so that's Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, and that's, like I said, a prequel to the movie, the Jim Henson puppet completely. The whole movie is nothing but puppets. There is not one human being, and it's not on Earth, it's on another planet. Every single thing you see on the screen is created by somebody, and it's a puppeteer, and every single thing. I mean, it's like an artist's dream come true to create this. It was whole world. It's a fantasy world of. It's basically like The Hobbit done in puppets only. It's amazing, and I gotta give credit where credit's due. That the creativity on this thing is through the roof. I mean, there were people from the Star Wars films that wanted to work on this project on Netflix. That's how they loved the idea of being able to create this much. I mean, I can't imagine how much it costed Netflix to recreate all of these things, because you got to remember that the original movie was done like in the late 70s, early 80s, somewhere in there by Jim Henson when he was alive. So this is, they had to recreate that and then kind of bring it up to date, but even at that, they had to keep it matching what's already been done, in the movie. And like I said, the movie is kind of the end result. It's like the movie is basically the book of Revelation to the story that they're telling on the Netflix show for Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. So if you watch the movie, you're kind of watching, it's a good movie, but that's kind of the end of the story. Whereas this is before all of the terrible things happened leading up to the movie. So anyway, that being said, here's a little brief synopsis that I wrote of the story, because this basically sums up in a real world way what's going on in this TV series. This is a whole series. This is like 10 episodes. Each episode's like an hour long. It's amazing. So anyway, Dark Crystal. The story basically is an elite group of greedy, self-centered creatures rule as god-like beings in a huge castle, while the rest of the world idolizes them. Well, at least they idolize them in the beginning of the story. Then they start finding out that the elites are evil and what they're doing to the regular people. So they idolize them and they look up to them like famous people or government officials that they worship, I'm talking about the bad guys in this. The bad guys are called the Skeksis, and they're kind of like bird-like looking people. They have a lot of gold and jewelry and long robes and all this stuff. They symbolize bad government in the worst way. Anyway, and they're the ruling elite. And they're the government of this world. Well, anyway, and so the Skeksis, they will stop at nothing to silence those who know the truth, that they are sucking the life energy out of the meek and the humble innocent people to live as long as they possibly can. Does that theme sound familiar? Because it sounds very familiar to me. It sounds like, once again, the elites trying to get adrenochrome out of children. That's the basic sum of it. Just like the last one, when I was talking about Dr. Sleep, the same theme again. But this is in more of a long form, being a TV show, which is 10 episodes, and like I said, each one's about an hour long, it seems like. Netflix must be paying a lot of money to get this done, and they did it right. So they did it so well that each episode is worth watching. It's amazing. I don't know why more people aren't talking about this, but I'm not trying to promote it. I'm just saying that as a kid growing up, this story was one of the stories that made me want to write stories to begin with. It's so creative. It makes a creative person's mind blow up with extreme creativity, I guess. It very much pushes you to want to create something. So anyway, the Skeksis in this are at the beginning, they're elites, and they sound like they're trying to be nice to the Gelflings. That's like they're kind of like hobbits, I guess, or elves, whatever kind of creatures. But anyway, they're smaller, regular people. You know, they're basically the people, and they're even guarding the Skeksis and protecting them. That's why I said like they idolize them. But my point is that the Skeksis are trying to live side by side with the Gelflings in a way, at least until the Skeksis figure out that they could drain the life force out of the Gelflings and all of the people of the world, and drink it and live forever, and it makes them look younger, and they basically get drunk on it, and they're obsessed with it. And then so the king of the Skeksis and the world, I guess, he ends up basically sending his minions. Well, he first finds out when the scientist does testing and tries to test one or whatever, and then he ends up basically killing her and draining all of her essence, and then he drinks some of it, and then he realizes that it basically makes him feel good and makes him feel younger and all that stuff. And then what happens is he ends up showing it to the king, and then so on and so forth. And now you got these group of these 10 or 12 whatever Skeksis, these elites, that realize that, hey, we got a population of people, and let's get rid of some of them, and let's just drink their essence, and we can live forever. And that's basically the theme of the story. And it's the moral of the story is, you know, that the elites take advantage of the people, and then they kill the innocent and drain their energy and try to live forever, just as Satan, tried to do in the Garden of Eden. And that's the theme. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but it takes a little bit of time and story to tell you all this stuff. The point of the story is, once again, this theme comes up of elites feeding on the innocent. And I know I'm beating this into the ground because, I actually talked about adrenochrome and the elites doing this on another episode in the past. But anyway, I'm just talking about the stories. So you see, the story sometimes mimics real life. Like science fiction can tell a story and not offend you and have it be the truth. Whereas it's harder to just make a story and just tell that specific story with real actors and all that stuff, because someone might say you're racist. But if you tell a story through science fiction, sometimes the story can tell more truth than the people who are talking about it on the news. But anyway, so I just wanted to cover this in this episode with all of these themes for the show, because the messages are clear if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, like the Bible says. Now, I'm not saying that the Bible tells you to go out and see all of the movies and all of the things that the world has to offer, and I'm not promoting everything that I'm into, but I do tend to be a creative person, I have a lot of stories in my mind, and there's a lot of stories I would like to write, and I'm thinking about, I'd actually like to make an anthology type series of a bunch of shows, like a bunch of stories to tell that are very dark, and they're very, let's just say Christians who will eventually listen to the show, if they listen to it, they will just say Leo is a New World Order shill because of the content that I will expose in telling these stories. But sometimes you have to tell a story from the point of view of the villain or from a person who's not Christian in order to get a point across about a Christian thing, like what's happening in Revelation. When you talk about Revelation, people taking the mark, well, you don't instantly throw out the whole Bible because the Bible says, well, they're taking the mark of the beast. No, it's warning you that they're taking the mark. They're not right for doing that, but it's telling you the truth. The truth is, people will do that. So now if I tell a story someday that says basically there's a bunch of people at like a place like Bohemian Grove having sex with a bunch of children running through the woods and trying to kill them, and I talk about that in a story, and there's all kinds of, certain things in the story that run throughout the story, like there's a number 33, and there's all these little symbolic things, giving you the theme, or any person like me who has eyes to see or ears to hear will pick up these things and go, oh, that's a Freemason sign, But the regular public who might listen or hear the show that I'm creating, they won't probably understand that because they're not educated and they don't have ears to hear and eyes to see. But anyway, the point of a show like that is to bring light to a dark thing. And I could see lots of little sci-fi little episodes and science fiction kind of horror almost borderline episodes like the Twilight Zone that would basically expose things, science that's wrong and immoral actions in the world, and basically talk about it so that people are aware of it. And then if they find out it's coming from a Christian point of view, in other words, I'm going to secretly slip in the Christian point of view. But I'm not going to, I wouldn't start the show off with, oh, this is John, he's a Christian, he's obviously being persecuted because he's a Christian. No, I'm not going to start off a series like that, because then it's just beating people over the head with something that they're not into probably. But if you start off a show like the Twilight Zone kind of, where it's just a bunch of little short stories that have nothing to do with Christians really, just things that are happening in the world around the time of the end or whatever, then people might be interested because they're seeing all these different stories that don't seem to be mixing and matching very well. They're just taking place at some point in time, And it's always about science gone wrong, technology gone wrong, the things that humans are doing is wrong, and basically it's asking the question, is it good to create such a thing or make hybrids or whatever like that? See what I'm saying? So if I talk about that, though, I know there's a certain group of Christians on the internet, because it's always on the internet, that will basically say that I'm a shill for the Illuminati, for the elites, and I'm working for them, and I'm some kind of a bad person secretly, and all that. When in reality, I'm telling a story and using the story as a tool to kind of open some eyes, other than in just the Christian community. Because, believe it or not, I don't like to preach to the choir. We're supposed to spread the gospel to the whole world. And sometimes, through stories, we can do that. Millions of people are going to watch movies. So what if Christians got good at telling stories and used that to spread the gospel? Well, anyway, that's pretty much all I have. Thanks for listening.
If you like this show, please share it with your friends. Promote it as much as possible before the internet censors us and takes down all of our content. Also check out the Fringianity Podcast Facebook group and page. New shows will be posted there, as well as show images. So check that out too. That's all for this show. So thank you very much for listening, and God bless.